Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today, another AIOps Power Hour. I hope you were here last week when we talked about the power of AI agents in the world of AIOps. But this week, we will be continuing our ongoing series talking about various AIOps topics on how to get value out of Agent Client Collector, specifically focusing on the world of AIOps, but we'll also be touching on some other areas too, including how to troubleshoot, as well as the architecture and all those great, amazing things about ACC, as well as some roadmap at the end. And that part of the session will not be recorded. So if you do want to hear a bit about the roadmap from Clay later, be sure to stay till the end of the session. And I'll talk about all the Q&A parts and other housekeeping things shortly as well in a few slides. And again, my name is Victoria Lowe. Thank you again for attending today's session. And in the case where you want to attend future live on ServiceNow sessions, in general, across all of ServiceNow or for ITOM specifically, more sessions like these, feel free to scan the QR code. But you can also go to the same place where you registered for this webinar and register for our future webinars as well. We will have an ITOM AIOps office hours next month or 2 months from now, as well as some upcoming sessions on what's new as part of the Zurich release. So be sure to register for those for ITOM. And in the efforts to put AI to work faster, we have various resources in ServiceNow, which include ServiceNow Impact, as well as technical training and certification and expert services. If you'd like to access any of these and look more into them, here are the QR codes as well. And this deck will also be available after the session on the community blog post for this event. So don't worry if you still want to see these slides later. Now, in terms of housekeeping, before I very shortly pass it over to the rest of the team and also do a fun safe harbor notice, we've saved time, or whatever time we will try to save time for Q&A at the end, but please put any questions you have in the Q&A module as part of Zoom. We have other people apart from the presenters today ready to answer any questions that you have, as well as this presentation will be recorded except for the roadmap part and will be available to you after the event, approximately 10 days after today's session. And there will also be a survey at the end for your feedback. So thank you in advance for any feedback that you may provide us today. And before I hand it over to the wonderful Remco and Clay, who will be presenting and leading today's session, I want to do a quick safe harbor notice for any forward-looking statements we may make. We are doing a bit of roadmap later, as well as there may be some questions that end up touching on future-looking statements. And so please recognize that all the statements that we're making are to the best of our knowledge right now, and they are still subject to change. So please do not make any purchasing decisions based off of any of these forward-looking statements that we may make. And with that, let me hand it over to Remco and Clay to introduce themselves today.
Clay, you go first.
Hey, good morning, everyone from the San Francisco office at ServiceNow. Nice to have you all here. I'm the product manager for Agent Client Collector, and looking forward to covering the content here today with you. Yeah, over to you, Ripko.
Hey, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Remco Lingers. I work in the EMEA Center of Excellence for ITOM. I will be taking you together with Clay on a tour of ACC, especially in monitoring and logs. So, safe harbor out of the way, introductions out of the way. So we're going to do a quick recap of ACC, how it works, and then we're going to be focusing on metrics, logs, and events, as well as some fun use cases that there are. And we'll be doing some labs or some demos showing you around a little bit, hopefully so you can set it up quicker and understand it better. And we're going to be talking about some practical approaches. So starting at the bottom, ACC is the agent that stretches out into your environment from the ServiceNow platform. It has a lot of use cases. So I mainly work in the AIOps and discovery area, but for sure there is a lot of value to be had from Agent Client Collector in the service management, asset management, and the SecOps. So It's our Swiss Army knife that reaches out into your environment and is able to collect and act on your behalf. And yeah, so in AIOps, collecting metrics, logs, events, understanding what's running on the CIs that it's running on. So it can be end user devices, can be servers or out there in the field or in your cloud. Being able to create checks that we have out of the box, or create your own if you need to, and do a remediation, and even sprinkle some AI in there. So Agent Client Collector is a framework. It can do many different things. So we have a few quick poll questions for you. So if all's well, the first one will pop up for you. We're always interested to learn a little bit about who we have on the call. Oh, interesting. We see those stats move live in Zoom, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'd say it's almost a tie for now. Yeah, we've got a good split of people not using it and people using it. So yeah, thanks for clicking through and letting us know what your use cases are.
Still interesting. All right. So moving on, like you said, ACC is a framework. I just want to quickly talk about how it's licensed, so you know what you can and can't use. The ACCF, right? If you're installing it, you will see that's a framework. You kind of always need that. And then we basically have three variants: the F, the V, and the M, and the L. V is for visibility, so understanding what you have, what the agent is looking at, so collecting data. That can be used with ITOM Visibility, AIOps Professional, and Enterprise. ACCM for monitoring, that can be used with ITOM Health and AIOps Professional and Enterprise. And the L is for a log. It's a method of collecting log files from each individual CIs. That can either be used when you have AIOps Enterprise or purchased HLA as an add-on to any other license. Now, DEX, maybe you're familiar with that. That's your digital extension to ITSM. So sometimes we speak about DEX. DEX also uses the Agent Client Collector as the method of collecting data on the end user devices. So if you read something about DEX, that's licensed by a part of ITSM. Good. Now that we have that out of the way, today we're mainly focused on monitoring and logs. So I want to quickly go over ACCM capabilities. When you are monitoring, right, you want to know what you're running on, what the latest status is, what applications are running on there, maybe what processes are running. Are my applications running? Are they consuming the amount of time that I have? So basic discovery slowly gets into more advanced discovery into software and running processes. Then we can collect metrics on where the Agent Client Collector itself is running. So it's supported on Mac, Linux, and Windows systems. So we can collect logs from either the OS or the applications running on those OSs. Of course, those can be everywhere on premise, out there at the end user devices sometimes, or in your private or public clouds. Based on events that may happen either in your log files or CPU or event or metrics that are exceeded, events can be generated, and AIOps can then respond to it. So one of the important parts is the agent listens to the checks that you've configured and can act accordingly. So it can also read your log files and look for patterns, define patterns. So and I'll speak to that later. So there is two flavors of log checking here. One is the pattern-based one that comes with ACCM, And the other one's a log shipping capability that comes with HCCL and HLA. So it's important to keep those separate. And I have a slide on later how you keep those apart. You can build your own checks. ACC comes with a lot of checks, pre-built checks, and we'll go over later how, what your approach may be on how to select those and when do you need to write your own ones. And there's also in the community, you could find checks that other people have been writing. And of course, always a strong point of ServiceNow platform, right? We have a centralized setup of everything. So if you have ACCs running in a large estate, you can control those from a centralized location. And if you want to make a change, you can push those out to the agent client collectors that are out there in the field. Now, of course, right, we'll talk about security a little bit later, because you may not want to be a deployable now platform to be able to push everything out. But if you want to, you can, but there's also methods of restricting that. So anything to add here, Clay?
No, that's a pretty comprehensive overview of ACCM. And yeah, we'll be diving deeper into these topics throughout the next hour or so.
Good. All right. As always, ServiceNow is each quarter adding new functionality. So this is the traditional way that agents have been run, right? Agents are installed by the administrator of those local hosts or CIs, and then they are programmed to report themselves to a mid server. And then that mid server goes off is connected to the ServiceNow instance. And that's it then requests work for that CI and what policies would apply there. So the important part here is that the installer of the agent, right, if it gets the right API key from the ServiceNow admin, the installer is the one who determines what capabilities are there. So this creates a separation of duty, where the installer of the agent determines what can and cannot be run from the ServiceNow instance, even though the policy may request it to be running more. So there's a separation of duty here, and there is no external password going into the CI from the mid server, which you'll have with traditional discovery. So this is a zero trust way of discovering your environment. Now, an important note here, the mid server, right? The agent needs to be able to connect to the mid server. So that mid server, you can have it talk to in round robin to multiple mid servers. So one mid server may be put on the internet. So if a user takes his laptop on the road and they're not on their standard network, but they're in a hotel room or something, it may be able to connect to the mid server on the internet, while when it's in the office, it connects to the mid server that's hosted locally in your internal networks. So think about that when you're designing this. Is my CI mobile? And if so, what mid servers do I need to use? And of course, multiple mid servers, right? If you are upgrading or you have a failover scenario, having multiple mid servers is desirable. All right. So recently, ServiceNow has added a non-mid server based approach to ACC, and for now, this is only for ACC visibility. So you see that one on the right, and on the left, on the right is sort of the traditional setup. That's a mid-based architecture, and on the left, it seems the CIs are directly connecting to the instance. Which you're not, but they are. There's a piece of software in front of it that collects all that data and then relays that to the ServiceNow instance. So in this way, if you have customers with hundreds of thousands of laptops, and therefore they don't need to run this fleet of mid servers, and since it's only ACCV, the mid server does not, on ACCM and ACCL, the mid server has important functions. But for ACCV, it's pretty much a pass-through of information. And therefore, at the moment, we started to offer midless architecture for agent client collector visibility. So very important note, if you're designing a solution, this is one of your options to consider.
Oh, and Remco, one other note. If people search our docs, we use ITOM Cloud Services or midless interchangeably for a lot of these use cases. So just a note there. And the other thing is that if you are using ITSM DEX, that is 100% midless. So the only way to connect the DEX product through ACC is through ICS. So you'll see that sprinkled through our docs, but just wanted to clarify that too for folks.
Yeah, and we have multiple. The ITOM Cloud Services sometimes confuses people. We have a habit of naming products sometimes in interesting ways. But the cloud services for now, right? That I understand why that name is. Maybe add things later to it, but for now, it's for this purpose of collecting data for large amounts of. Oops, I went a little quick here. For large amounts of or small amounts of, but it is something I have a slide later on how to set that up and how to check if it's running or if that's even configured. And there's an info doc on if you want that to check if it's already running in the instance and how which endpoint URLs to use. One more part, right? To make that clear, what's what, right? If you're starting to install agent client collector, maybe on a test instance, you'll need to install the separate packages. The one for ACCL L is missing here, but of course you can see how that would go. An important one is also the spoke. We have spokes for ACCs, so ACCs can be used in Flow Designer, and flows can reach out, either collect information or do things on agent client collectors in Flow Designer, and also later, of course, with AI agents. So Clay Hendley made on the right here. So ACCV and DEX can talk to ITOM Cloud Services. ACCV can also talk to a mid-server. ACCM and ACCL for now only can be used with a mid-server in the loop. All right, our next poll question.
And this one's also a little bit of a quiz. It's okay if you don't know the answer, but this is also kind of part of the reason why ACC is that Swiss Army knife, is what it's built on. So if you don't know, please take your best guess. We'll be diving into some of the capabilities and kind of explaining why that is. I will also admit one of these is kind of a trick question, but we'll give you partial credit if you do answer one of these. I think that's some answers are coming in. All right. I have to give people credit though. I think people are mostly getting the right answer here, including the trick question there. So yeah. And of course, it's not super clear in our docs, but it is based on Sensu-Go, which itself is based on Nagios, and that's exactly why it is kind of a Swiss Army knife with a lot of different plugins and capabilities, and why it is so extendable. So Sensu-Go, which itself is derived from Nagios, is the answer there. So yeah, thanks for answering.
All right, let's get a little bit into more technical. If you have to configure ACC, you first have to make a check definition. Basically, what is it going to check? Is it going to check just if something is running or not, or it's going to do some action on the client and it'll return the result. And so you then put those checks in a policy, and a policy basically connects a number of checks with a number of CIs. So I'm saying all my Linux or my Linux in this environment are going to run all these checks because I know it's an SAP environment and I want to do a certain number of checks on them. Now, ServiceNow has created a number of check types, right? So we came out of the box with events and all these, But you can also make your own, right? It could be like Clay said, it could be the Swiss Army knife that, I don't want to do monitoring or anything else with it, but I just want to collect some information. And then later when the data arrives at the ServiceNow instance, I want to process it in a certain way. This is a little more advanced use case, but it certainly can be done. There's some community articles out there, which I'll point to later on to help you do this. The one thing I struggled a little bit in the beginning is the difference between a check definition and a check instance. I understand now why it's there, right? The check definition is the basic definition of it. And at some point, when it's assigned and when it's running against a group of CIs, it becomes a check instance. So it's basically a running copy of a check definition. That's how it works in my head. Yeah, so yep, I will leave it at that. Hopefully this helps you a little bit on thinking that through. So let's go to the steps when you or somebody else installed the agent, like what's happening. So the agent starts running. It has a number of during the installation, it gets an endpoint of the mid server and an API key and maybe some other setups that we'll talk about later. And it'll register itself with one of the mid servers. It'll try in order of the list that it has. And then it says, hey, I'm here. And then the mid server passes that request through. And then the policies on the agents are going to look, oh, does this fit anywhere? Do I need to send any checks to this agent? So yeah, so that's a sort of the first registration step. Important to note, right? The person who installs the agent, they control the API key. That cannot be done from the ServiceNow instance. That's the important part here for security purposes. Then, okay, the CI is now known in this. The agent with the CI on it is now known in the ServiceNow instance. It's going to say, oh, it's this Linux, or maybe in this environment running, based on criteria. I can say, I'm going to give these checks to you, right? Basically, it applies policies to that CI, and it starts sending the work to the agent. Now, the agent will check if those checks are allowed to run. Right? So the person who installs the agent also controls which checks can be run. Also, a very important part of the security here. The installer of the endpoint determines what can be done. So it may be while you're setting up and developing your policies and your checks, you want to disable that, right? But once it's running and you want to lock that down and make it more secure, you're going to be looking at that. So I'll show you later how that can be controlled. And as a final, right, the ACC now knows what it needs to do. It'll start processing these checks, and the agent can be configured only to consume X%, maybe 3% of the CPU power on that on its host. So within those boundaries, it tries to execute the checks, and it sends the data back to the mid server, and the mid server then sends those results back into the ServiceNow instance. And so that basically concludes, the whole walkthrough of installing and registering, and then seeing what policies apply, and then running those checks within those policies, and collecting the data. Now, if the data is metrics, then the machine learning processing is done on the mid server. So therefore, the mid server if metrics are being sent back, maybe CPU usage or transaction per second or whatever metrics that you're collecting with your agent, the machine learning is done on that mid server, and then forwarded to the ServiceNow instance for viewing and anomaly detection. So a little bit of a topology layout and two more concepts to talk about. So ServiceNow instance sits here. It has a metric database on the top left and an events table and logs database on the right. Mid servers, the HCCs talk to the mid servers via TLS WebSockets. And it can collect local data from where the ACC is running, but it can also go out and collect data from either clouds or SNMP or HTTP endpoints or VMware. And a concept here is when the agent is in proxy mode. And in proxy mode, this means that it's not collecting data from itself, but it's proxying data back and forth. So one of the out-of-the-box integrations that we have is with Azure Batch API, where for a large number of CIs, every, let's say, minute, it can collect all the metrics, let's say, from all your VMs or all your SQL databases and send those back into the mid server and into the ServiceNow instance, right? So doing that one by one will not be fast enough. Therefore, a proxy with multi-CI capability has been created. So important to understand here: proxy agents and multiple CIs. So that's dependent on the check. So of course, when the agent is running, it may consume a lot more CPU because it is shuffling back and forth a lot of data for maybe all of your Microsoft Azure environment. And therefore, it cannot be contained by just 5% of a host. It's when it's a proxy agent, it's going to be a dedicated host, and that's how you have to think about it. So, yeah.
And Ribko, one just point of clarification, because it comes up a lot on the proxy agent. Proxy agent is not discovering a proxy server. It's a mode for ACC itself.
Yes,
I realize
that's
again, the naming can be confusing, but it's nothing to do with proxy servers.
No. Overloaded terms in IT. Absolutely. Yes. So how can you see, right? I'm going to show some. If you go into policies, I'll show you later how to get there. And maybe actually now is a good time to do so. Let me show you some checks before we do the proxy agent and multi-CI. Let me show you some checks. Maybe some of you are super familiar with set up a number of ACCs already, but if you haven't, right, you go into the ServiceNow instance and you type agent client, and then you will see let's say the three main setup things to concern about. One is policies and check definitions, and later we'll speak about ACC plugins. There's more, but we're not going to use that for now. So policies is each policy is a list of checks that it'll run and on a group of CIs. So hopefully this opens relatively quickly. And let's say Active Directory metrics, right? So this is the check. There's always a description here on what it's doing. And there is this policy only has one check. It could have any number of checks, and is currently not active. But if it would be active, it would show here on which agents it is actually collecting information. So and in this field here, you see, okay, for what CIs is this check going to be active? Now, my personal recommendation, not sure it's ServiceNow recommendation, leave the default policies and checks alone. Leave them for your discovery and view. But if you found a useful one, copy the check over, copy the policy over, and make your own. That will maximize your chances of upgrades working flawlessly. That's just my personal recommendation. Not sure you agree with that, Clay, but that's what I would do. Then you have you keep the out of the box clean, and upgrades will go fine. But up to you. So again, this is policy. Policy is here. You define the CIs that this policy is active with. And if you would go into Edit Sandbox and you would do your modification here. Say, I want to do this on, servers that are in production, that are maybe in this domain, or have this name, right? Whatever, you can do any number of configurations here. And you're going to run the check instances against this. So maybe you'll start by checking the checks. So we have currently out of the box for 400 plus checks. So you will, yeah, and I have some DEX ones in there, but you will, you may or may not see all of the ones that I have because I have loaded all our content on here. So I think one of your jobs, if you're going to look into this, have a browse that say which ones are for Linux or for Windows. I need to set up a certain monitoring system. You would go and check the ones that are out of the box. And that should be your first port of call in seeing what checks are available. And I copy those checks over to new ones. That's basically one-on-one copy, but make it your own, and then make your own policy so you have that in parallel to everything that's out of the box. So I have a few checks here that we'll be looking at later because I've done some testing, and I'll show you a little bit how you can tinker with the checks. Okay, coming back to proxy agents, right? Remember, proxy agents shuffles data back and forth for a large number of CIs. So I'm not sure if they're out of the box, the column proxy agent or multi-CI mode. I think I added them with the icon here. So here you can see the Azure VM metrics. That is actually a proxy check, right? Proxy policy, and it's running on this agent. And multi-CI mode is true. So this check will collect information from multiple CIs, and since it's proxy agent, it's pretty much dedicated in checking these, collecting these metrics, because metrics are collected, every so often, and it's done that because Azure has a batch API where you can request up to 1,000 CIs. I believe it was 60 metrics up to 1,000 CIs in one go, and therefore you can shuffle a lot of data back and forth. Right, so if you read that proxy, now I did create a blog on how to set that up from scratch. So if you go to the communities and don't want to reinvent the wheel, I have a step-by-step guide for you to go make that happen, make your life a little easier. Okay, we have already touched about this. When you have a centralized platform and that's going to reach out to a lot of agents that are, maybe hundreds of thousands or dozens, security generally gets concerned about blast radius. What if one of them gets compromised? How can I incur, how do I, if I need to set up a maximum for security? So the concept of, you need to speak about this with your security people up front. And otherwise, and also maybe the people that have to install this. I'm assuming you're from the ServiceNow team. You may not be able to go out and just install agents everywhere. You need to talk to other people doing that for you. So to get you armed a little bit with some knowledge. ACC can run as a runs as a non-admin user as by default. Depending on the OS, you can add privileges to it. Of course, right? Non-admin can't do an upgrade, right? It doesn't have package install, right? So the security comes with restrictions as it used to be, but by default it doesn't run as admin. Now that may not be a concern to you, or it may only be concern in some areas and not in others. And sometimes you may want to actually have it run as an admin. But you need to think about at what user is going to run that, and as that user, what can it connect to, and what is it able to do. So it may be that you define a check and you send it to the ACC, but the ACC, the user that it runs as, does not have the capability to run that command or do that, right? So it's one thing you need to keep in the back of your mind. There are sudo privileges and there's all kinds of other things that you can do, but this is something that comes into play here.
And Remco, I'll add on the admin side, the most common reason for someone running ACC as an admin is exactly what you just said. Certain types of discovery data, like the serial number on Linux, or sometimes it's like specific metadata for an Oracle server. You have to be an administrator to use that. So that would be a reason why you would kind of be in that situation in the first place. And I would say the second one too is currently you can upgrade ACC automatically from the instance Obviously, to run an MMSI installer or a Mac OS installer, you do have to be an administrator. So if you do want to take advantage of that upgrade functionality from the instance, you'll also need to be an admin user. But again, by default, that is not required.
Yep. And we only recently added that, right, Clay? Upgrade ability.
Yeah, that's only new in the past 7 or 8 months or so.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good. So, the product can do it. It may not be possible within the constraints of what your environment is. So once again, I think I've said this a number of times. The person who deploys the software, they control the API key, and they also control the allow list. So the allow list is the JSON formatted list of the checks that are allowed to be run. Some environments are super restrictive. It has nothing in there. But this is something, if you're starting to run checks and it won't run, right? It may be that your check that you're trying to use isn't in the allow list on the agent, right? So you have to be aware. When I'm testing, I always disable the whole allow list until I get it working, and then I put it back. And I'll show you a little trick later on how to help you set up that allow list, because formatting JSON is not my hobby. And it's easy to make a mistake here and there and lose some time on that. As Clay said, right, enable upgrade, auto upgrade, only possible if you are a user. Now, the policies and the checks can contain scripts or commands, and they are in the ServiceNow instance. And when a check and a policy is assigned to a certain CI, those checks get and those scripts get migrated over to the ACC. And the concern is, right, how do I know after maybe some time that what's on the ACC is still the same as what originally was there? So there is a signature mechanism in what we call the plugin. I show that later, where you can say, because the signature is the same, nobody has tampered in the meantime with the content of that plugin. So it's an additional, I call that anti-tampering. That's my terminology. But it is a method to say whatever I configured on the ServiceNow instance, it's made it intact, and it's still intact all the way onto the agent client collector. And if somebody changes the script, then the signature won't work anymore, and therefore the agent client collector will likely refuse to run it because the signature. I always turn off. When I'm testing setting up, I turn off the signature, right? But there's a little bit of process to generate that signature. But you need to know that that's available, so you can lock that down and make that work. Good. How to write a check. And I put a little because I see a lot of people being confused about a check in a check instance. A policy makes a copy of a check, and it becomes a check instance. So I put a little diagram here. I stole that from our training, so if you're going to write a check, right, you may need to create a plugin, and a plugin is a list of scripts or things you want to run when the check runs. Then you may need to create a check type. So these may or may not be needed. What's always needed is make a check definition and a policy. So let me show you. So I went into a check definition, and I just want to show you, the out of the box checks that are there, because that's your first job is, before I'm going to create anything new, is something already there in the ServiceNow default checks. And we've written some. So this in the monitoring, right? I started with, I want to make sure that a certain process is running, because then I know my application's running at least, and I want to make sure that it's not spawning all over and over again, but I want it to be up for a number of minutes. So I looked for in Linux, and he said, okay, this is in the check type events. And here is, we have a Ruby file, a Ruby check called check processes. And this is basically just a man page of what it can do. So it checks the number of processes against the threshold and returns critical, warning, and OK. So this is a very important data piece here. And based on the output, this check type events will see if one of these is available. If OK, it does nothing. If it's critical, warning, the event check type will generate an event, and that will go on its merry way in ServiceNow AIOps, and then start handling that as an alert. So out of the box, it says it has a lot of parameters here. So out of the box, nothing is here, right? So it's kind of an empty thing. So if you're designing it, you need to start filling this. Again, I would make a copy of it and then start filling in it. But for the purpose here, I want to ensure my Falcon security mandates that we run the Falcon security daemon. So I want to make sure that every of my assets has one of this pattern running. Now I say I need more than one, but not I need more than one, but not more than one. So this is the number of processes that will do by this pattern. So this is what you need to set. This will not be there by default. So if you run this check, it won't do anything because you haven't given it any parameters. Now the parameters, I'm just using this as a simple one. This can do many more things, right? It can do exclude patterns. It can see if it's a daemon. I can say, is this process using more or less CPU than number, right? So I'm using it in a very simple form, but this check can be used in many shapes. So if you configured it, you want to test, you say test check. And of course, this assumes that I have a number of agent client collectors out there. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do here, go here. Why is it doing this to me? And it's going to run on this agent, and it's either going to give me OK. So it says this was OK. It found one process matching, and there's a Falcon D something command running. So this was fine. Right? If I would probably edit the number, make it 0 here, see if it still would work fine. Run that again. Right, and now it failed because it's not matching to the parameters that I gave it here, and now it'll have it'll be a warning, right? So it's not good enough to these parameters, and an alert will be created. So this would be a good check that I put in, but the point here is, if you're designing something, look what's available before doing anything. There's quite a rich set of tests out there already for you to check. Let me do some other tests here. So we looked at the OS check process. I've also made two more just as a sample. If you change the exec mode here, I used to have the ServiceNow standard, but it can also be used to run commands. I put a little Linux command, ls-l. I wouldn't know what the purpose of that is, but I just want to make the point that a check can be just a command that runs locally on the OS. In this case, it wouldn't need any parameters, but I can just run this here, and I would get, it takes just does ls on wherever that user that it runs at, and I get that data back. Now, if there's useful data for me, I could process this and make a decision whether to do something or not. All right, so this is just a point that a check can be an OS command, and it can be running in shell mode. Some more demoing. I have also created a script, right? And I'm going to show later how you can tar that up, make a check out of that, how it can be processed into the ACC. But just assume that from the ServiceNow instance, a script called check Falcon sh It's going to be run over, pushed over to the agent client from the instance. And as you can see, I made a plugin here called a check Falcon D. I'll show you later how to make that one. But it does very similar things. And I'm picking up again. So it's a script that I've written basically to do the same check. Is the Falcon D running? And that script, in this case, if it does, it gives an OK back. And if it doesn't, it gives a critical back. And then this, question mark, green question mark would be an error. And then since it's an event, that would be picked up and would be processed as an alert to be handled later. Right. So you can do out of the box checks. You can use local commands, or you can create scripts or checks yourself, or you can even download checks from the internet to be run. Maybe a good point here, as I said, I created a check. Let me see if I can find that in ACC plugins. So if you want to write your own checks, right? And let's go to I'm going to my local machine here, the computer that I'm working on. I've written a little script, right? That check Falcon script. I have put that in a directory called bin. Let me show you. And of course, right, the exit code that we just saw, if Falcon D is running, it does a pgrep x. People familiar with Linux knows what that does. And it says if it's running, it's okay, and if it's not running, it's critical. Just a little sample script. What I can do, I can then tar this up, and the command a little later, and then give that a tar gz file. And then I would go to my ServiceNow instance, and I would create a new agent client collector plugin. I've already done this for you. We don't need to do it again. As you can see, I can uploaded this check.tar.gz here and gave that some names. And here's the instructions on how to do that. If you press new, it'll give you these instructions. And you have to do a chmod -x, otherwise you can't execute. And you need to make sure that it's in the allow list. So some good instructions here. So what happens? You upload this into the instance, you make a check out of this, you make a policy out of this, and then this file sits here on the instance. And when the check is assigned to the CI, it'll get downloaded. So let me see where, and let me show you where that then ends up. Let me see where. Going with this, yeah. So it's in var cache ServiceNow agent client collector. So now I'm on the host where the agent client collector is running, and as you can see here, in the directory, the check Falcon agent, the check Falcon D script is located. Let me see if I can get there. And in the bin file, in the bin directory, that file will be, right? And therefore, it's able to execute this on here. All right, so hopefully this demonstrates, right, if you create a check on the ServiceNow instance and the CIA and there's a security allows to run this check, then this tar.gz file will be pushed over and it'll be able to run whatever is in this check and send the data back to the ServiceNow instance. Good. Let's push forward because we got a lot to create. So I've already talked about this a little bit. So when you need to design checks, think of the out-of-the-box one first. Maybe run OS native commands. Linux scripts are usually fairly lightweight. PowerShells already get a little bit more CPU and memory hungry, especially if you spawn a lot of them. We write our own scripts in Ruby, and of course we can run Sensu and Nagios, a subset of those checks we can run as well. So as Clay said, our agent client collector is a Sensu agent plus OS query. OS query, hopefully you're familiar with that. That is basically a sort of a database that constantly collects data information from the underlying OS. I believe it's written by Facebook originally. But it can do, it's a database where you, with some commands, you can do queries against. So without having to write a lot of code yourself, you can use, these are all the tables that exist in that database. And you can query against that. So lots of information is already here and really easily accessible for you to use the data in your monitoring. So one of your jobs, right? If you can't find an out of the box one, you don't want to write anything specifically. Look through here. Is the data in OS Query available? And many of our own checks use this OS Query as well. I will let me now demonstrate how that OS Query would work on an agent client collector. So agent OS Query is I wanted to do that, not
And
OS Query is
Remco,
yeah.
while you get OS Query, I also wanted to add we've seen customers with great success, obviously per their own internal corporate policies, using different GenAI tools to generate OS queries that are pretty powerful. So if you don't know what you want, definitely try the approved GenAI tool, and we've seen people be really successful with using that to get the data out.
Yep. I just happen to know a table that's called RPM packages, and basically, if you know OS Query, you can just select. Since there are lots of packages here, it's probably take a few seconds, and this output. Now I believe you can do dot tables to see. Oh, if I can type. See what tables are available. I did not get that right. It's dot tables, not dot slash tables. A little bit of a lag here, making things interesting. Yeah, so here, as you can see, what OS Query is available for you. So one of your jobs is to check what OS Query is. This is really lightweight without bothering the underlying OS very much. So making a check out of that is good. Yep. So I think. Yep, so we talked about out-of-the-box checks, OS Query, native commands. So consideration, of course, how frequent are you going to run a check? How long is the check running? And how much CPU and memory is it going to be used? So some of the cloud machines are very thin, right? Maybe one or two CPUs, a little bit of memory. So make your checks not so much that it impacts the workload. I did show share a process. Let me get out of OS Query here. I did show a check that was check process, right? We were checking for the Falcon daemon to be running. Now that uses one of the out-of-the-box connectors, out-of-the-box checks that we have. Sometimes via the UI, if you want to try those. Do I need the switches and all that can be a bit time consuming. Therefore, I want to show you a method of running the checks on the host here to do quick, faster iteration. So if you put in here, the part is Ruby, right? So you need to give it Ruby needs to run this this check. The checks are in var cache ServiceNow. This will run that check in one go. And it'll say I have found 195 commands. So I recreated the command that was just checking for the Falcon agent, and then it'll be dash P Falcon dash capital W3. Right, it'll run this and say I found two matching processes. Right, so with this, where you can quickly tinker with the switches here instead of having to do that via ServiceNow instance. So if you have access to an agent that you need to make checks for, then running the Ruby plugins locally, maybe speeding up your process a little bit. Okay, let's go back to the deck. Yeah, that's here. Good. All right. I think I already talked about this, but I'll do it a little bit again. So, oops, that's not what I want to do. If you need to create your own check type, so we have checks out of the box, right? We have check types out of the box, which is event in this case, right? We're talking about ACCM mostly. It knows how to respond to the data coming back from our checks. If you want to create like your own checks and you want to do something very specific with the data, you may need to create your own check type. And since it's a bit of an advanced use case, it's not in the and you have to go in via. Let me do this again for you. You check type. It's in the documentation, right? ServiceNow agent check type list. Here you have the check types. If you need to make your own, right? We use this metrics one. So what this does is the agent sends data back to the instance, and the instance then needs to do something with that data. In this case, metrics or events, that's the one that we used. Is this a problem? Do I need to create an alert out of this? But you can have other use cases. You may want to fill another table. You may want to kick off AI agents. Who knows what you want to do, right? Or you may need to process that data even further before it gets into the right table or the IRE, whatever that you want to do. So if you need additional processing done to the data, maybe on a custom check, you do that with check types. So for advanced use cases, that may be necessary, but it wouldn't be your first move. So it's quite simple. You go to this list, you create a record, and from there on, you have to write a script that processes the data coming back from the agent. Right. Already showed this, but I'll show you in the instance. Remember that I created a script. I tarred it up. I uploaded it, and we talked about the signature file, and they're in ACC plugins. So let me show that again. This is where those custom-made plugins go. As I said, I created this one. These are the ones that are out of the box. These are they live on the instance, and they get pushed out into the ACC when it's allowed to run that. How to write a check definition, especially for around ACC, right? You create a new one, you specify it as events. You know when that file gets pushed over. This is the command that you want to run. In this case, it's a shell command, right? So I run it as a shell. I want to run it every 60 seconds, and I need to define that, hey, in order for this to run, I need to push these two plugins. Pretty straightforward. So this is the definition of the check. Now, some checks may have parameters, right? This check doesn't have that, so we'll have additional configuration on top of that. Right, then from a check, you need to put a check in a policy. In the policy, you define, okay, on which CIs are these checks to be pushed. This is the most important one. I'm going to run this. This check is going to run on every server that's in the Linux table. And in this case, I locked it down into a host name. You would likely do that. And then you can see the check instance. So it made an instance of that check. And it's going to run this every time. And I kind of click on this, but you see this is distributed to one agent. If this was a broader, of course, there'll be multiple more agents visible. That's basically high over how you need to think about this. Good. One thing is generate allow list content. Let me show that as well. Let me go to a check. Let's pick this one. So remember that the allow list it was installed by the installer of the ACC. It specifies which checks can be run. So if you need to give that information to the installer, you can do this here, generate allow list content, and therefore this JSON argument will be, this JSON file will be generated for you, and then you can pick and choose the checks that you want to be able to run on that, I think, check process is the one that we're looking for, right? You would pick this one up, right, and add that to the allow list, so this check can be run. So this is the list. Of course, it's all here, so you need to prune this down to the ones that security or the owner of the CI lets you run, and the ones that you need, right? So important part here, but taking some work out, some other work out in creating those JSON files to fill the allow list file. Right. We keep adding functionality. And recently, I think there's a lot of requests from our DEX product. DEX product sits on the end user devices, and it monitors in the user's browser what SaaS platforms or what services are they going to, and a minimized list that it'll look for. So it monitors if the user uses, right, whatever it's configured, but for ChatGPT or ServiceNow or and basically we can. It's not listening for all the URL, but it's listening for very specific URLs, and it's putting those back into ServiceNow instance for SAM use cases. But if you deploy the ACC on end user devices, this can be it's included with. It has an Edge browser and a Chrome browser plugin, and this article describes on how to set that up. So specifically for end user devices and SAM use cases. One interesting use case that a colleague of mine recently did, shout out to Carlos, he included ACC in AI agents, and he's done that by let's say there is an incident on a certain CI. He had the AI agent detect whether that has an ACC on it, and if so, it used a flow designer to call out, give me the running processes, give me the running services, give me system details, and that data came back from the ACC and was used in the reasoning of the agent to determine, was there something wrong with the host, or was it some other problem, right? So ACC is being used as a data collecting method in AI agent use cases. I thought it was very interesting and novel approach. So hopefully this gets your creative juices going and think about this too. And this is basically the output that he had. Right, so here is the that. This is hopefully you're familiar with our AI Agent Studio. In this case, right, it analyzed the data coming back from the instance, and it analyzed like, hey, I got all this process information back. Does there appear to be something wrong, right? Is something hogging the CPU, or is there like hundreds of thousands of threads spawning, right? That doesn't look healthy. So yeah, it can add reasoning based on the data collected, and it can help eliminate where the problem isn't, right? If the OS looks just fine and nothing out of the ordinary. So a great use case as far as I'm concerned. Since about a year, we have a functionality called synthetic monitoring. Hopefully you're familiar with synthetic monitoring. That monitors applications or API endpoints from generally geographical locations to see if the URLs plus some checks that it can do is available. Now, it's not about a synthetic monitoring here, but it's about the agents are used as the endpoints to do the synthetic monitoring checks from. So if you will have an application that runs on the internet, you may want to, do 3 synthetic monitoring locations, one maybe from EMEA, from APAC, and from Americas, and define if your endpoint is available to see whether maybe the application is running okay, but there's some network problems, or there's some localized caching that causes issues. But ACC is the important part here. That you can geographically use as an endpoint to synthetically monitor your applications. Now, since very shortly, it doesn't need ACC. It can also be done directly from a mid server. So you have options here, but ACC is an important part for you to consider here. So Clay, you added the one on the right. Maybe you want to speak to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're running short on time, but there's a lot of new stuff around ITOM Cloud Services, as we discussed earlier. This is very specific to both DEX and if you're using ACCV on laptops and endpoints. Um, but once you install the ITOM Cloud Services app, you'll get some nice diagnostic checks. This is a really good landing page to go to make sure it's all set up and working. So I won't go too deep into this, but some more information is linked there below.
Yep, and this is on the top left is the bottom left is the app that you need to install, and there's a little nifty check that I use, instance name on the top here, where you can see if what services are running. A little bit of an admin part here, but interesting enough to discover and check if it's running, or maybe you need to contact support to get this enabled. There are lots of metrics and monitoring checks for you available. You can develop them also yourselves. I just highlighted here, right? You search for the check types, I've added a blog that I also used if you want to put custom metrics in there. But like I said, explore what's available before you're going out on a limb and developing lots of checks yourself, because there's quite a bit already on there. And if you need us to write things, right? Clay's there as the PM to prioritize what we're developing, what we're putting our efforts in there. So we're always, and put an idea in the communities pages that are there, and there's lots of or add pluses to the ideas that are already out there. They're reviewed by our PMs. I want to briefly talk about ACCL. We're running a little short on time here. ACCL is the transport mechanism that collects logs and ships them to the mid server for further processing. So, but there's also logs for ACCM, and hopefully I can make that a little bit clear here with a little bit of a show. So this is the log shipper. This takes the logs, and so this is running on somewhere on a Linux server here. This takes logs and forwards them to the instance, and then with health log analytics, it'll see if it can detect anomalies in those logs. So in this instance, it is checking these 4 logs, but you can add more logs if you want. You can do wildcards here. You can just, if you have more logs for your applications, those can be added here. So ACCL is the mechanism to get those. If some of our customers have a centralized log option, they push all the logs there. If this part of your estate does not have that functionality, you can install Agent Client Collector to collect those logs for you. Some customers have a mix of both. Oops, I didn't want to do that. But I did want to do this. So this is a log shipping for health log analytics. There's also ACCM, right? Linux log monitoring, for example. That is a pattern-based approach that doesn't need health log analytics. It will not have all the fancy AI that we do. Health log analytics is AI to the brim, all that AIOps detection methods. This is basically scraping the logs in real time, seeing that if it finds errors or anything that you wanted to look for. So if you have ACCM and you want to do basic log monitoring, you enable these policies. In the beginning, it wasn't all that clear. So, if it says, I think I have that on the next slide. If you hover over the description and it says forwarding logs to the mid server, that will mean that it's health log analytics. If you click into the log, the check, and it says here's the pattern to look for. Then it's ACCM, and you can use that if you have ITOM health. So yeah, so this was an example, right? Here is the ACCM version, local log check for patterns. It'll look in this log file. It'll pass, in this case, it'll for severe exceptions. You can add all kinds of patterns here. And then if those are detected, an event will be created. And this is the util log checks check. And this is the ACC for log shipping to HLA. This is a file beat. It packages up the logs, and in this case, it checks for these log files for anomalies and forwards them to the mid server for further processing. Yep. So this is your giveaway. If you hover over it and it says sends them for the mid server further analysis, then you're dealing with a check that's for HLA. Now you may not have that installed at all, right? When you're not entitled for health log analytics, but if you are in an instance which has everything installed, it's not always clear cut to keep those apart. So hopefully this helps you a little bit. In the interest of time, I think I had a little upgrade here. You can go over that in the 30 seconds, right? You get your new, this is a Linux example. You get the new file, you stop the agent client collector, you update the packages, you restart, and then of course you see this log file, you keep it up for a minute, right? See if the upgrade went smoothly. This is of course the manual way of doing it. Of course, it can also be automated by installer software, but I just wanted to give you some high-level steps to upgrade it in a Linux environment. Now, if we, as of a couple months ago, if it's running as root, it can do the upgrade push from the instance. Of course, that's dependent on security environment. I've already demoed this, right? I always, when I'm developing something, I have one terminal window open with the log files. It always gives you the input. Now you can increase the log files from info to debug, right? If you're running into problems and you're not seeing them, you may need to increase that in the acc.yaml file. And show that, right, you can run OS query manually if you want to do some quick development. That's also quite useful. And in Windows, right, when this is the command that I use to watch the log file if you're developing on Linux. On Windows, this is the command to use to keep a check on it. I think pretty good training we have on there. I think it's all now for free on ServiceNow University's the on demand. So please look out for that as well if you're interested. Add some more resources. There's some good blogs out there from colleagues as well, from Kim and Will, to help you with some of the content that we've quickly covered today. As well as some ITOM Academy, I think is very recent, very worthwhile looking into as well for some additional content. So, Victoria, I think you need to stop the recording for a little bit. All right. I think Victoria, you put this in. You want to talk to it?
Yeah, for sure. So if you're interested in having follow-up conversations with Remco or any of the other members as part of the COE, or if you have specific ideas, feel free to fill out the form in the QR code. It's also been pasted in the chat with the same prompt, interested in learning more about today's topic. Feel free to put anything else you want to mention. Again, today's call is specifically focused on the world of ACC. If you have specific questions about licensing, purchasing, probably contact your account team directly, but otherwise, feel free to throw your name there if you want to have a chat with Remco and Co. in the future or in the near future. I want to thank you, Remco and Clay, so much for today's fantastic session. So much technical knowledge that admittedly I don't think I would have. I'll be honest, and I really appreciate all the work that both of you did today, and thank you to everyone else also for attending today's session. We hope to see you again soon when we have some of these more AIOps Power Hour sessions going forward, but regardless, hopefully you come to our What's New in Zurich next month as well. So again, thank you everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And obviously, again, thank you to Remco, Clay again, and everyone else internally who also attended and supported this call today.